No, I wouldn't be nervous at all. Don't
Yeah.
worry. This is
मैंने कोई
uh,
तैयारी नहीं की specifically, but I think it's
कोई
like
नहीं.
cash, ना? हाँ.
हाँ, हम नवा पॉडकास्ट के लिए तैयारी करना जरूरी नहीं है. हो गई तो क्या फायदा.
ठीक है, cool. Awesome. चलो,
So
let's.
Sharanya, thank you so much for joining. It's really
Thank you.
great having you.
Thanks for having me. I was reading your, like I was telling you, I was like reading your newsletter through writing the piece that we're going to talk about. So it's quite special.
So, as an introduction, it'd be great if you could give a little introduction of this piece that you just referred to, which was great, and then maybe I can also give a sense of sort of my read of the piece. But I'd love it if you could give everybody that hasn't yet read it a sense of what it is.
Yeah. So this is a piece that eventually was called Dear Neighbor, which is kind of like, I don't, I mean, when I started researching it, I didn't realize it was going to turn out like this, but it's a piece about Pakistani music in India, like how Indian listeners listen to Pakistani music in like the 2000s, 2010s, jahan pe, like when it just started coming to TV and our cell phones, वगैरह, like, and it's kind of a way to think about how we listen to Pakistani music in India, but then also what it tells us about India today. It's not kind of, I think बहुत सारी pieces हुई हैं that it's like, it's like a moment of solidarity and coming together, वगैरह, which I think it is. But I think for me, the bigger concern was kind of like, मतलब असल में तो there isn't that much solidarity happening right now on a political level, or like, there's not that much that's allowed for us as people across the borders to meet, to like talk, to visit each other, to dur ki baat hai. But so I was just kind of like, what does this stuff tell us about surveillance and everything in India, like in India today, like what, and also a big, I think the main crux was that I'm getting into like political territory, but like why not? But also the idea is that nowadays, like there's a lot of like resentment for neighboring nations, especially Pakistan, because the idea is that to demonize people against Pakistan is to like also really justify what's happening here with Indian Muslims. Like that's the, like the government does a very seamless job of it. So फिर like, and like I was encountering this a lot. I was like, um just like, I mean, or ek to yahan pe, like if you say anything, or if you like, if you criticize anything, then they'll be like, Pakistan chale jao. Kaise yaar? Like what a random, like, so it's like, it became like a shout. So I was just kind of like, what are these two kind of Pakistans that exist in this? And then also people love Pakistan music. Like when Coke Studio season 14 came out, I mean, everybody lost it. Like it didn't matter kya ho raha hai, kya nahi ho raha hai. So, and even like like in buses, around the north of the country, you'll always hear Atif playing, and like, boys are listening to Atif Aslam all the time. So it's kind of like, what is happening? I wanted to make sense of this situation. So it started off like that. And then also, like, there's so many artists that I love and I listen to, which all of it didn't make it into the piece, but I wanted to also think about like that stuff is धीरे-धीरे करके, like it reduced to the version that it is at the moment, which is about listening to Pakistani music in like the 2000s and kind of juxtaposing it with now, with culture today in India. Sorry, very long summary.
No, that's great. It's like I feel like I learned so much more about what you think and the article from what you just said. Um, and what I saw, so this is an article for people that aren't aware in 52.in. That's correct, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And this article, it takes montages of Pakistani songs being heard in India. Like I see it mostly just as these sort of little scenes that you draw,
Yeah.
and you use them as ways to say things about India overall, which I find really interesting. And I think especially from across the border, the really interesting bit is realizing how much of the same things that we grew up listening to and are listening to now are generating so much meaning across the border, and especially for those of us that remember a slightly friendlier time, it's optimistic in a way. And I think parts of the article that you wrote were not necessarily optimistic, but I found a sense of optimism there because it felt like even in the scenes of India that you were creating, there were these moments of just kind of crazy small joy. Like you joined a bunch of Adi's Twitter Spaces, which I think is just what a great story. And I'd love if you could like say a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I didn't know these like there was an official term for Atif Aslam fans. Like मैं कह रही थी, like everywhere people listen to Atif. You know, like there's I remember like मेरे घर के पास there's a place where it's called Atif Roll Corner, and it's like जब भी उनका नया गाना आता है, he's like there's like huge discounts, and all of the packaging is like pictures of Atif just printed on recycled paper and stuff. अब वो बंद हो गया. I don't know where he's gone. But
Just to be clear, there is a shop near your house called Atif Roll Corner where Atif
yeah,
is the mascot for everything.
he is. Yeah. So it's like
That's
it's just
amazing.
yeah, it was really good. It's not around anymore, but I remember when I was growing up, it was huge. And this kind of stuff works because people are obsessed with that first in all
No, so
kinds
wait,
of.
I have lots of questions about Atif Roll Corner. Sorry, I know a lot of people in my audience are obsessed with this sort of thing, which is why I'm going to ask a few more questions. Like, what sorts of things are sold as Atif Roll Corner?
I mean, it's just a regular roll. It's like like I mean, keema roll, kebab roll, like normal. But it's just the branding is really like or was. It's not around anymore. I actually went looking for it before I did the piece. But I've moved back to where I grew up now in the neighborhood. But जब मैं बड़ी हो रही थी, it was there. Then I moved away, and then I came back, and I looked for the shop, but it wasn't there. So I mean, the idea was just like this guy like loved Atif Aslam, and it was just like regular rolls. They weren't great or anything, but just the branding was really strong. Na? So Atfa some fans could come or anybody could come. It was just really fun. There's also like Sunny Leone roll corner, but ये होते रहता है. But it's just the Atifan was my favorite. Like it happens quite a lot. Or and like just this like and you know people would get the same haircut as he did. Boys would do this thing like now everyone has the Virat Kohli haircut, but there was a time when there was like this very specific art for some hairstyle that had become really and popular. So they put a picture of him in the barbers, vagera. So like you know everyone like looked the same. So it's just like for me this kind of young male fandom was super interesting because you know, like there was, and I mean, there's like this whole phenomena of Indian women being obsessed with Fawad Khan and stuff like that. There's also that, but then like the
I
young,
don't think it's just Indian women.
eh, yeah, no, it's like all women everywhere. But like there was, I mean, with the boys, it for me it was interesting because all this like radicalization, वगैरह, it happens to the boys. Na? They say like, ये तुम्हारे दुश्मन है, ये नहीं है, ये करो, and but then there's also these like spaces where this masculinity is just like I mean, it's just so intimate. Like everyone's like talking about their feelings, and you know, like they're actually expressing to each other through music. So for me, that was important. So essentially, I didn't know Adi's was an official fan name. So I was on मैंने YouTube comments पे लोगों को message किया, but obviously no one responded. They were like, "Who's this creep? Like what's happening?" So I was like, "Please, मुझे email करिए, मुझे बात करनी है." But I got zero responses, even though I sent like so many messages. So I was like, I need to do something else. So I went on. I didn't have Instagram, so it was also quite creepy. So मैंने Instagram profile बनाई, like no post, nothing, and then I kind of got in touch with some of these accounts, and they all turned out to be there was one person I met who was a woman in her 30s. Otherwise, who I haven't featured in the piece because she like the quotes didn't make it. But otherwise, it was all teenagers. Like it was all like 18-year-olds to 23s as Sada. And you know, and I was like, you know, when I was younger, so Atif Aslam used to come play in India, and there was like more stuff happening. And I was like, these guys actually grew up in a time जहाँ पे नहीं है मतलब concerts नहीं होते, you know, college festivals पे Pakistani bands नहीं आते. So what is like what drives them. So yeah, essentially, like I wanted to talk to them, and they just all turned out to be really fun and really intelligent. Like I was obviously like, "Oh, बच्चे हैं, like क्या बता देंगे?" You know, like I was really condescending when I was like starting to talk to them. But there was so much kind of like nuance and everything that they told me about, and so many of them told me कि हम लड़के हैं, हम बात नहीं कर सकते किसी चीज के बारे में, and you know, like because you have to be tough and everything. But Atif के गाने सुन के, you know, like we feel really emotional and that's like a space for us to kind of like have feelings. So I thought that was really cool. So I wanted that to make it into the piece. Um, but yeah, and then generally like in the Adi's Twitter spaces and everything, and even that kind of stuff, you know, it's just like it's kids from India and Pakistan, like on that. Like I remember one of these spaces was I think it was Lucknow, Faisalabad, Mangalore, which is in the south, and like just like all kinds of Hyderabad se the. I don't know which Hyderabad it is, like Indian or Pakistani, but there was like people there from all these places. And then there was like one kind of supervisor whose name was Haris, who's from Lahore, I think, who'd come in and like kind of tell people facts, and then he would leave, and then the kids would just talk amongst themselves. They'd be like, "Kya kar rahe ho? Aapke ghar pe sab theek hai?" Like just regular, like, अच्छा ये खाते हैं आप, ये क्या है, पानी गंदा है यहाँ पे, like just generally, like. And I think there was like lots of questions about Faisalabad, because the girl from Faisalabad was huge, like she had mad personality, so she was like the main person in the calls. I just thought it was really sweet, like they like actually talking. And like you said, it's just it's joyful, because you don't like we don't get to do this, and then people do, and then it's like that video jahan pe I think it's Indian Pakistani cricket fans dancing to Pasuri outside a cricket stadium or something. And like people watch that on repeat. Like I watched it all the time, my dad watched it, and I was just like, yeah, fine, theek hai yaar, thoda it's like a bit cheesy or whatever, but it like matters, like it made me feel really good. And why should I discount that feeling? And even those videos of like Virat and like generally the cricket teams meeting and like hanging out, like all of that stuff is just really heartwarming. People like it. So I was like, this, I also want this emotion to make it in. It's just really sweet. It's really good. So yeah, I mean, like you said, like for me, it was important to put that in because I was kind of like putting pressure on myself. Okay, it shouldn't be like a feel good piece only, but it is also, right? Because there are moments of joy.
In a way, I think like a feel good piece about you know Pakistan India collective YouTube commentary is is really quite wonderful. I think in this moment, that is uh, the controversial opinion. It is the harder thing to say in a sort of mainstream article. So I feel like you did the right thing. Um, you mentioned Virat Kohli and his videos. Like Kohli is really loved in
Yeah,
Pakistan
yeah,
in a sort of really begrudging way,
yeah,
because he's always so good against us. Dhoni is loved also, but not as begrudgingly. Dhoni is
yeah.
there's more sort of sincere love for, but perhaps it's hard to match the love for Balaji. Are you aware of this?
Of the Virat?
In I think it
Huh, sorry.
of the love of Lakshmipati Balaji.
No, I'm not aware of it. No.
This was in the I think 2004 tour when India came to Pakistan. I think it was in this tour. I remember being in Gaddafi Stadium and
Huh,
वो इंडियन वाले पंजाब साइड से ना दो तीन सरदार जी थे
huh.
हमारे स्टैंड में and they were
Okay.
only identifiable because if you see someone in the turban, it's in that case it would have been more likely that they were from that side
Hmm.
of the border और वो शायद शर्टें भी पहनी थी उन्होंने. अच्छा हम बहुत ही बुरी तरह हार रहे थे, मतलब बहुत
Huh.
बुरी तरह, लाइक कोई होप नहीं था उस मैच में. And the
Hmm.
Indian crowd was probably, I want to say 10% or less, but the entire stadium was yelling India, India. ये मुझे याद है करना. So
Yeah,
it's not that long ago that this was happening.
yeah.
And on that tour, Balaji was a follower, was a fast bowler follower, क्या was a
Hmm.
fast bowler for India in that team. Got this
Hmm.
like cult following in Lahore
That's
for some
amazing.
unexplained reason. And I think just the fact that it was also kind of unexplainable made it even bigger in Lahore. And I think you can find a couple of videos online of Balaji and his like ridiculous fame in Pakistan. I think Lahore especially, which
That's
is one of my like most favorite like stories to discuss with
yeah.
friends from across the border.
That's really cool. And also it's like, also I think for us here right now, like Pakistani memes and like general stuff is just so funny. So everyone kind of like catches on to the it just catches on to the sentiment, like it's always kind of like it's just really I mean it's just like बहुत मजेदार है, like you just want to participate. And there's like Momin Saqib, the Pakistani cricket fan, he's become like a reference in India. Like people literally say like एक मिनट में जिंदगी बदल दी, just बात बदल दी, whatever, like, in conversation. Like it was not a thing before that video, but now it's like a joke. It's like, I mean, not like a joke, like everybody just says it. Like अगर कोई दुकान बंद होगी, then people are like एक मिनट में जिंदगी बदल दी, just बात बदल दी. Like it's become like a thing, which is so funny because it's so fun. Like why wouldn't you do it? So
My
I
favorite thing from the T20 World Cup, I think, I'm not sure if it was last year या एशिया कप में था शायद, कि विराट कोहली ना मोमिन के पास आता है और कहता है सुना भाई बड़े बर्गर पिज्जे खाते रहे हो. And to me it was crazy that he
yeah,
knew of that video. um, but I didn't realize how big Momin had gotten in India, but I guess it makes sense.
Momin is huge. My sister's fiance messages him and is like, "Bhai, ek baar hi kar de." Kind of vibes. It's like to leave him alone. Like on his birthday, we all messaged him and we were like, "Can you just say hi to this guy because he loves you?" Like my sister's boyfriend. And it's like just yeah, like I think people are they really love him. Like which is just really because it's so fun. Like, and it's not just that he's hilarious, he is, but that sentiment is so fun. I suppose be competitiveness, it just became this whole thing of like everybody laughing together. So yeah. So I wanted that to make it in because मुझे बहुत मजे आते हैं. Like what I do is like just hang out on the internet and like look at this stuff and I feel bad. So I was like, this matters. So I want to
No, I think Pakistani like dark humor Twitter is a sort of really great genre of comedy
exactly.
that we have at least learned to build as a coping strategy. और वो पोस्ट क्रिकेट तो एक अलग वो है ना गेम, लेकिन हमने फिर एक अपनी जनरल पर्सनालिटी में भी उसको अपना लिया है कि भाई यही हमारा तरीका है इस तरह
Yeah.
ऑपरेट करने का. तो किसी क्राइसिस मोमेंट में हम
हाँ.
रेडी होते हैं मीम्स के साथ.
हाँ, you guys are like really acing the memes, हाँ? हमें कोई मतलब Indian memes are pretty funny यार, but not that funny. I think everyone like now it's become a thing कि पाकिस्तान में गाना भी ज़्यादा अच्छा गाते हैं और memes भी बेहतर हैं. Like this is the
बस ये दो
baseline.
चीजें हम बेहतर करते हैं आपसे. तो आई थिंक इन द डील इट वर्क्स आउट ओके.
Yeah, it's fine. So yeah, so
So
yeah.
what I really go for it.
No, no, no. I was just kind of rambling on and saying कि ये मुझे like it mattered to me to put that in, like because I was having a really hard time when I was writing it, like initially, just generally, and I was like, I want some people to feel a bit happy as well. So yeah.
I think you made the right call. Um, I think what I'm really interested in knowing, and I get the feeling that artists are interested in knowing also, is how are Atif and even all the newer artists discovered in India, especially by these younger audiences? Because the people that you're describing were not going to concerts 20 years ago when Atif and Jal were and Strings were actually touring.
Yeah.
And so somehow they are still discovering these artists and becoming fans, and then finding friends in Faisalabad to be on voice chats with. So what is that pipeline?
Yeah, so it's for some reason I just assumed that this was also, I guess, it would be the same way that we were doing it. But like when I was younger, when I was about 12, was when like Jal, Nuri, and everybody started coming, and we had this. This was like really fun for me to research because I was quite like I was like a teen, like an early teenager. तो मुझे ज़्यादा नहीं याद है, and I was just kind of copying the bhaiyas in my neighborhood. I was like, ये जो भी करते हैं मैं वही करूँगी. It was like they were listening to like other. I was listening to other. It was just like a straight line for me. But what we were doing was there was songs.pk. शायद पता नहीं पाकिस्तान में भी था ना songs.pk obviously. Yeah, I was just like it's just like an Indian
पाकिस्तान में
choli.
songs.pk था और एक था अपनी isp.com is the most notorious. Are you
Oh man,
familiar with अपनी isp?
no, no, no.
That is most notorious because before every download they put in a little voiceover. जैसे
Okay.
आजकल वो आता है ना कोक स्टूडियो 10 वाला वॉइस ओवर या
हाँ.
like whatever show. The pioneer for that was apni isp, and before the song would start it would say apniisp.com, and then the
That's
song would
amazing.
start.
That's amazing. That's really good. But yeah, so I mean that's and like here we had I think it was actually I looked into my old diary वगैरह. It's 6 rupees for 3 songs, so it's like 2 rupees a song. So जाके you could just be like ये वाला like ये 3 गाने डाल दो and so this guy in the neighborhood he was controlling what everybody was listening to because वो decide करते कि कौन से गाने हमारे phones में डालने हैं. So like that's how we started listening to it. Like because there would be these small like kirani ki dukaan pe there would just be a counter where they had Pakistani music and you'd go and be like भैया ये 3 गाने डाल दो and then you'd be like नहीं ये नया वाला है ये डाल like सुन लो वगैरह. So he was like fully controlling what was happening. But and there was no streaming and stuff, right? And then this was happening for a long time and there was pirated CDs. I remember this like जलपरी की सीडी लोग उसको वो कॉपी कर करके लाइक बाय इट इन स्कूल फॉर लाइक 1 रुपए का रेंटल एक हफ्ते के लिए like serious like economy going on with this stuff. But and then there was we have a place called Palika Bazaar जहाँ पे you could find everything. So like some enterprising teenagers used to go there and हर चीज लेके then they used to like sell it to other people. So it was like very kind of underground. And then it became sort of like we had these music shops जहाँ पे you could just stand and like listen to something and then leave. A Planet M karke, it didn't really last. But there and then like there we had Pakistani bands coming in, and then we had TV pe He started coming in, but it was like a limited kind of selection. But people were really, it was like it was just really, it was really good. So that's what I was like. I'm going to try and find the sentiment of कि क्यों हम लोग सुनते थे वगैरह. But it was also just really good. And I remember like Manik, who I couldn't use this quote, who's a writer in Delhi from a place in the hills. He was like, it was just better than like this is what he said. He was like, it's better than jo hum log kya ho raha tha because it wasn't like mummy papa music. Like it wasn't like, oh, everything wasn't really like cute and like just kind of guarded. It is there was a bit more edge to it, and it's true. So I mean, with these kids, I don't actually know how they were uh, kind of discovering it. I think with the Adis, it's very much like the old, like OG Adis who are older, kind of send these songs to a lot of the young, the younger folk. Like Shubham, who I was talking to, told me he kind of like joined the community and then he would ask people, कि मैं क्या सुनूं, क्या नहीं सुनूं. And also they listen to it with like older siblings. I talked to five guys and four boys and one girl, and they told me कि वो उनके यहाँ like उनके भैया सुनते थे या दुकान पे चलता था whatever, and then like it just kind of stayed in their mind, and they were like, this voice is so specific. And I think in Indian like media, his voice does stand out because it's not got that hyper trained thing happening. Like it's not got that like बहुत classical music like but alap shalap नहीं होती है उसमें. So it's kind of just like it kind of stands out, and it is for me it's less boring because I was kind of I like done with the same thing. So I think for them as well it was the same thing that struck them. So, and then there's like YouTube and there's T series and stuff, so they could find stuff there. But it is really commendable that it's like still around. And so many of them, I was like, they listened to all the old albums, usko rip karke, phir, they like put in their computers, read it. It's not like they only listen to new Bollywood stuff. So, yeah, that's what I found.
Unsurprisingly, this is, I don't know why this is, shocking to me, but the way that I feel like our young people discover Bollywood or interact
Hmm.
with Bollywood is very similar. Like hum bhi jab, 20 years ago when DVDs were still a thing before streaming, we would have the shop that would have all the pirated like
Yeah.
Indian movies. And everybody's like older siblings or parents were into like particular Indian movies, and every time you would get like a VCD player, then you get all the VCDs, or a DVD player, you'd get all the DVDs. And we had our like markets जहाँ पे हम जाके लेके आते थे और वहीं वो इंडियन गाने चल रहे होते हैं
हाँ.
स्पीकरों पे आप जाके सुनते हैं, and then you get socialized, and then that becomes the thing that you wanted. बीच में फिल्में
Yeah.
चलनी भी शुरू हुई थी, and then people got really into them. And now I think like you're less likely to hear an Indian song blaring on the street.
Hmm.
Weddings, yes, but street maybe not as much as before. लेकिन अब तो YouTube के बाद तो like जो भी सुनना है फौरन मिल जाता
Yeah.
है. So I guess like all the younger folks are getting into it through that reason. And one of the big things that at least we've noticed is the interaction of the newer Pakistani artists with these Indian YouTubers, especially like reaction videos, और वो आपस में एक बहुत connection बन रहा है. There's the sort of hip hop scene जहाँ तो बहुत ही ज़्यादा है, but even in the
Hmm.
kind of mainstream pop, these like Indian reaction videos reacting to Pakistani songs are a big thing. And I'm wondering whether you saw um, that pop up in the people that you talk to.
No, actually, I was watching those when I was writing the piece, and I remember I saw something about Misha Shafi's hot mango chutney sauce, and like people loved it, and I mean, and people love Hassan Rahim, like it's just like it's happening. But even so, it was at least what I found was that in the volume of like people listening to Adat, even though you had to buy like pay money at a dukan and get it on your phone, वगैरह, utna tab bhi there's not that much. There's not that much kind of reception, which is crazy because musicians today in Pakistan are so good. It's like that, like it's so good. So I'm wondering if, like, I was trying to figure out if this kind of like surveillance politically is affecting culture, and it seems like Zada, like because हर कॉलेज फेस्टिवल पे हर चीज पे बजते थे जल के गाने like like all the time 24/7. I remember when they'd come to play it would be like I remember getting like walked over मतलब धक्का देके के लोग आगे भाग रहे हैं like it was like madness like it was just kind of like if they've come to Delhi soil मतलब उनको उनके पीछे भागो पूरे time like people are like taking food and running just like mauling them. I was like guys relax, but that's not I feel like that kind of hysterical sentiment. I don't know, maybe it's because it's easier to access things and like more things online. But definitely a lot of people talked about new artists and were like, it's so good, and expressed some. So the Adis only listened to Atif. Like they were not very diverse in their listening
That's,
things.
I
And they were,
think,
yeah,
true across the border. Mhm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So they were listening to Atif and Arjit Singh, who's kind of like Atif's, like, you know, I mean, it was like and they, like, many of them were also Arjit fans. So, but like a lot of the music, like musicians I spoke to, like Arjun S. Ravi, hai hamare yahan, like he's a documentary filmmaker. He used to run like a lot of like festivals and stuff, and he was like, he was he was so sad. He was just like, "Meh, like it sucks that I can't get people to play here. I can't." You can't kind of encourage more real life collaboration. And then and I think he said something which I kind of felt as well. He was like, online to ho jati hai, like interaction, वगैरह. But like it is nice to like think that you can do stuff tangibly, like you have a festival where everybody comes together and stuff like that. So that's not feeling like a possibility. I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered your question at all, but
That's fine.
yeah,
I'm not
this.
even sure I remember what it was. But your answer was clearly more interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, there definitely is a sense of like loss. Or I'm just like, yeah, why is it not easier? Like what's happening? Because maybe, and it is a sense of like nostalgia about the 2010s, वगैरह, but it was like, there was. I remember when we were in school, we had every year we had the class 9 के जो बच्चे थे उनको exchange program होती थी. So we used to get kids from Islamabad to come to school and like stay. You had like nominate and people would like stay with us, and when you just talk, and it was like super exciting because you were like, oh my god, like this is because you're teenagers, so everybody would like have these like short term romances, and it was really sweet. It was just like it was like really good, but that's not like happening anymore. Like that vibe is not possible. So I feel kind of bad. I'm just
Yeah.
like everyone
I
deserves that.
traveled to India on one of those programs,
Oh,
on one of those
cool.
exchange programs.
Go
So
ahead.
I've been a couple of times. Or one of those was like an exchange program. And the
Huh?
really funny story that ties it all together is that, so we prepared, हमारे जो group था उसमें, they prepared a few things that they wanted to like either perform or give to like the sort of uh, Indian school that we went to. तो मैं तो खैर उसमें performing group में नहीं था, but we had one really good singer on the group. And so guess what song he sung at the school assembly?
It was like I mean,
It
Bollywood was a Bollywood song.
No, it was Adat,
Oh
and
my God. That is
it
the
went
true.
smashingly.
Yeah, yeah, great. That's really good. I wish I'd spoken to you with a
And
piece.
this
It's
was
like,
2004.
yeah, crazy. Obviously, Adat has
So
done more for like cross-border relationships than we can admit. Like this.
it split the band but united two countries. So I think uh, the
Yeah.
story that is needs to be the story of Adat.
That's amazing. That's really good. So where did you travel to? Matlab, which city?
We went to Delhi. This our exchange program was with Delhi with a school called Modern School.
Oh, the
उसमें
school.
भी मॉडर्न स्कूल के बहुत सारे हैं ना उसमें, हाँ बहुत सारे
हाँ.
ब्रांचेस हैं.
Hmm.
So we went to the Vasant Vihar school. उससे हमारा exchange था.
अच्छा, ठीक है. Okay.
So we had a family that hosted us really graciously. So me and the singer lived with one family, and then everybody else sort of
Cool. Yeah.
went with a few others. So I had a really great time because my family is from Delhi. And
Okay.
so we migrated at partition. तो मैं जब गया तो मेरे दादा ने मुझे कहा कि तुम जाना उधर, उधर मैं मेरा स्कूल था,
Oh,
और उधर
so
फिरना.
sweet.
So for me it was really great to just be able to sort of go. And um, uh, I think I felt so at home at Delhi because it seemed so much like Lahore.
Yeah.
And that I still carry that feeling with me, that every time I talk to people about Lahore, I'm just like, हाँ Lahore Delhi मिलते जुलते हैं.
Yeah. That's so nice. Thank you for telling me this. That's really sweet. Like, obviously, like when I was writing the story, for me, because my grandfather grew up in Karachi, so it was like, and he just passed away. So I was kind of like holding that quite, and I was like holding that emotion quite close to me. And I think it is something unconsciously I did because I never written about that. और मुझे ना, because I've never known how to address it. It's kind of like because कोई बात नहीं करता मेरी family में about anything. It's kind of like हाँ था कुछ हुआ था. Like, it's like, can you just like tell me a bit more?
Another thing
Like,
that unites families across borders. Um,
yeah, just the suppression of whatever trauma or whatever they went through. But yeah, and like I was thinking about this, and I was like, I had this kind of like pining for Karachi where I'm just like, my sister and I always like jane, but like it's so hard. And around the same time, actually, I had a friend from Karachi who used to live in Delhi who was like staying with me in the house, and she told me a lot of stuff, and like some stuff like coincided with my grandfather's memories and stuff. So like that's something that I wanted to to do, like to, I mean, I guess like didn't want to do, but wo ho hi jata hai, like just kind of stories and things, just the like that emotion sort of maybe made its way to the piece. Um, क्या कहते हैं, like there's this German word ना कि like missing a place you've never been to or something, like I don't know, I see some Japanese word or something, like that's how I feel
I'm
about
sure there's a German word for that.
you know.
It's Yeah, no, I get that totally.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, that's right.
uh
So yeah,
I
that's
mean, Delhi I've been to now, which for me is a sort of stark memory. But my family also had links to Dhaka for a while, which I've never been to, and I really want to go. So I get
mm,
exactly what you're saying, and there's so much shared. And I think that time that you were reminiscing about, the early 2000s, there seemed a promise of finally being able to build something kind of new together. Which that's the promise that seems to have been lost. And I get the feeling from creatives in Pakistan, especially many of whom have, often you'll find one who have bigger audiences in India than they do in Pakistan, which is really crazy. And for them
yeah,
to not be able to just go meet them, um,
yeah,
is just upsetting and sad, and is the one thing keeping these people from turning creative full time.
yeah,
Because you wrote about this in the piece as well, is the promise of going to India was uh, relying on infrastructure and
hmm,
cash that you wouldn't have accessed in Pakistan, and it gave people a sense of legitimacy, like all the way back to Junoon and even Nazi Hassan when they like got um, were welcomed into Bollywood. Their stardom increased so much in Pakistan as well, and their ability to uh, financially and kind of culturally have a standing was developed so much. And even in this era, when people have more access to Indian audiences through YouTube, in a way, you can't establish that same level of reputation or stardom or independence that you used to be able to.
yeah. Yeah, no. And this is something that I did want to talk about actually. So I'm glad you brought it up because for me, I didn't know. Like we are here and we're like Pakistan artists are so good and everything's so good. And we don't realize that the amount of money and like industry that is here with mainstream like music and stuff like that, I think we just take it for granted because Bollywood has so much money. So I think we just take it for granted कि इतने पैसे हैं यहाँ पे, like this kind of like state supported industry exists, and it's not something that you have to like, I mean, abhi to ho raha hai, like you can't, like nowadays there's a lot of like surveillance for what you can make, what you can't make. But before it wasn't like that. Like in the 60s, 70s, up until the 90s, it was, you could like make things and make money, so much money from producing stuff. And this was not something I knew until I spoke to Sameer Shami, who's जो मौला जट की टीम में है, and he used to be Atif's bassist. So he told me, he was like, like वो जब हम स्टूडियोज वगैरह में गए बॉम्बे में, when you went to Yashrat Studios, he was just like, and I've never been, but I can just imagine that it's a huge deal. Like it's just, it's like a really, really, just everything is like in place, and it has been in place for 5, 6 decades, or even more, maybe like 10 decades. So that is something that's really huge, and that's not something people can do anymore. And then the more I thought about this, the more like my editors told me about this thing कि इमरान हाशमी के films में सिर्फ पाकिस्तानी singers होते थे, and it's like a joke कि इमरान हाशमी की films हम, they're not very good, but गाने बहुत बढ़िया आते हैं. And it was like that's also Pakistani artists की बदौलत, like so everything was, the more I thought about it, the more, like Dhoop Kinare everyone talked to me about, which is a show that people used to watch quite a lot here. But just generally, like things kept coming up, and not just the main guys that I was thinking about, like Fawad Khan and Mahira Khan and stuff, but like more people, like Javed Sheikh. They were like, I met like people of my dad's age were Javed Sheikh fans, which I didn't know. That also couldn't make it into the piece, but I thought there was stuff happening here. Like it was,
I
there's just been,
recently
like,
saw a clip of I think it was Mehuna. Usme like Javed Sheikh was in either Mehuna or Om Shanti Om. I'm forgetting one of the two.
he's an Om Shanti
He
Om.
was in like
Huh.
one of the big Shah Rukh Khan films. And I saw Javed Sheikh walk by, and I was like, oh wow, this was so normal.
Sorry, Zira, I couldn't hear you क्योंकि ये planes उड़ा रहे हैं. एक second. It's like three. Just like never ending, huh? Or like एक हफ्ते के लिए. Anyway, हाँ. Doesn't stop.
नहीं, वो मुझे थोड़े दिन पहले एक क्लिप नजर आया, उसमें जावेद शेख वाज इन लाइक अ बिग शाहरुख खान मूवी. Om
Mm,
Shanti Om थी, right? And it's
yeah,
I just I mean when that happened, it was so normal that it didn't stick in my mind as an anomaly. But then when I ran into it now, I was like, oh wow, that's so
yeah.
strange in the
No,
current context that this was so normal.
Yeah, it was really normal. And like, like there's this, I don't know, like in Netflix now there's this film called Tara and Bilal or something. I mean, it's called Tara and Bilal. I don't know why I'm pretending like I haven't watched it. I've watched it like twice. It's a rom-com about two people in London, and it's quite evident that one the like Tara is Indian and Bilal, who they don't say is Pakistani, is like, you just know with the dialects of like his mom, yeah, phir wo khana kaise bana rahe hain, like just general like small cultural like nuances, but you can't say like they, like I remember when Veer Zara was made, okay, big production, it was still like a thing, like people were talking about it, but यहाँ पे बोल नहीं रहे कि it's just kind of like South Asians in London, but it is very much like, that's there. And I thought it was really commendable that this film has been made abhi, like it's been made, and it's on Netflix and people are watching it. Not many people are talking about it. And but before, like 5 6 years ago, I would have I mean, like 8 years ago, I wouldn't, it would have just been normal, like it's like he kept, it's a London story, so like this happens. But nowadays everything has this kind of like, wow, kya bana diya hai inhone. It's just like a regular film. Like I remember we watched Mehuna again when I was doing the piece, and my sister and I were like, wow, kitni progressive movie hai, like crazy. But like it does feel like that, because nowadays you can't do it. Like this is the whole film is about Aman ki Asha and like, people getting together across the borders and stuff. But और तब कभी नहीं सोचा था कि मैं हूं was going to be some politically radical film, but now it feels like that. So yeah,
Yeah, I wonder how much of it is us aging and how much of it is just the times changing, and it's probably a factor of both. But you're right.
yeah,
Like looking back at those times, they feel so crazy anomalous. कि अब
yeah,
तो बिल्कुल अजीब लगता है कि if that same level of thing happened, if like Hassan Raheem was playing big concerts in Delhi, like being
yeah,
swarmed by audiences, that would be uh, a sort of ridiculous occurrence in a way that the sort of same level of uh, kind of shock and awe there's like when Junoon went the first time and sort of
yeah.
took over in the mid 90s.
Yeah. And I think today it's kind of like, I mean, I would, and obviously like on YouTube comments, everyone's like, please aa jao yaar, in Delhi mein concert baja lo again. But like when we talk about it, it's kind of like you worry about people's safety and stuff, which is not something that would have struck me. Because I was at these concerts I was at the concerts in like 2005, 6, 9, वगैरह, in Delhi University. But you weren't thinking that like kuch ho jayega. Like you were still like, wow, this is like really fun and really cool. And like this is like Suyash, who I spoke to, who told me this anecdote about like when Strings did this thing when they sang Janu Meri Jaan, and they did like, instead of Sara Hindustan, they did Sara Pakistan. And like everybody did that. And then apparently uske baad, जो मैंने लिखा नहीं, and पता नहीं, we have to edit this out, but there was like a India, like Hindustan Zindabad, Pakistan Zindabad kind of like chorus, like both things. And he told me this and he was like, can you imagine? And I was like, I was there. I remember this. But actually, I can't imagine it. Like, nahi ho sakta hai. Like, it's just, at least, like, I mean, like here, I speak about here, I don't believe it's, it's just like,
I
it just,
agree with you. I mean, I went to an Arijit concert here in Seattle. And
mm,
Arijit filled this like big, 10,000 person arena outside, about an hour outside of the city, which I thought was really impressive because Seattle is a big town, but not as big as San Francisco or
huh,
New York. And but the crowd was full,
hmm,
and it was great because Arijit even played Sayuni, which I thought was hilarious, like hilarious
yeah,
in a good way. It was like he's playing Sayuni in this crowd, and it was like obviously very बहुत कम minority थी Pakistanis की. But then there
huh,
was an odd thing where the MC, this was around when the airstrikes were happening a couple of years ago.
yeah,
So the MC before Arijit came on,
hmm,
one of his kind of main lines before he announced Arijit was "How's the Josh," which in
yeah,
Pakistan had become this sort of like triggering thing. And so
yeah,
for me, that really changed the color of the event in a way that I wasn't sure if I like should be there or shouldn't.
yeah,
And then at that same concert to hear Sayuni played a little bit after was for me like a really weird juxtaposition. And I don't
yeah,
know how the scenes were describing, of strings, uh, leading
hmm,
these like Hindustan Zindabad, Pakistan Zindabad chants in
yeah.
India, how that same level of scene shows up again with the same generosity in today's moment, at least.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's this house the Josh thing that I could go on for about for ages, but we don't have to go there. But it's just like, yeah, this kind of like color, na? It's like a ye bhi hai. It's like, yeah, kya kar rahe ho? Like it's just kind of like, it just dampens some people's spirits, and then obviously lifts so many people's spirits. That's why they keep doing it. But this kind of, and a film critic I spoke to, who I again couldn't include, was like, this is happening a lot, like just like a injection of like anti-Pakistan sentiment in films. Or itni military films bante rehti hai, it's like so many, but it's kind of like, just like there's like a little, like, there'll be like one character, one something, like something will be said. And but like, and also there was, and nowadays like casual films don't get made. Just say there was this Happy Bhag Jayegi, like a story about a girl from Amritsar who kind of runs away from her marriage and then ends up in Lahore and like lives there. And this kind of film, which is not, again, it wasn't very good. But then again, like today, Uday and I were talking about, and we're like, wow, what a film! Just because it's just kind of like, it's just a bit. Well, it's like really progressive if you think about art. के वक्त पे तो नहीं, मतलब, it's just that different angle to everything that is there right now. Like everything. Like yesterday, I went to get meat. Like my kasai ke paas gayi, and he had shan masala on the counters. And I haven't seen shan masala in India for like 5 years. So I was like, oh my god, ये क्या हो रहा है? कहाँ से आया? And he was like, यार ये हमेशा यही था. Just relax. Because I hadn't been able to find it. They kind of like, it sort of disappeared, or maybe it didn't disappear, and we just imagined that it disappeared. But it was like just like small things. Like there used to be this Pakistani textile fair in Delhi 2 times a year, and Delhi girls used to be like manic. वहाँ पे मतलब लड़ाइयाँ हो रही हैं, like people are punching each other to get like the last salwar, like it was big, and that just doesn't happen anymore. So now there's this whole thing of like copy boutiques where I guess they're just like seeing what's happening in Pakistan, like copying the design. So there's all this like weird stuff happening. Anyway, sorry, rambles, but like
No, no,
there is a sense.
I have this weird supply line where my family, when they want to order like sarees from India, order them to me, and then I take them there.
Yeah.
Um, or इसी तरह, like Dubai is a big center of like India Pakistan trade. Things go to Dubai and then make their way either to India or to Lahore, and this happens quite a bit now. And you run into it, and it's not uh, uncommon. Obviously, it's not like every day because it's so hard to do, but it's not uncommon at all. Um, Chalta hai, but it's just so much harder than it needs to be or should be.
Sure thing. Yeah. And it's like यहाँ पे there's like a okay, 200% import tax on anything. So if I get a book from Karachi, it'll be like 200, 300 times the price of it, which is ridiculous. And before it was like 9%. So
आप
they've
कौन
kind
सी
of
कराची
just
से बुक्स ऑर्डर कर रहे हैं? Because all Pakistani authors that you buy in Pakistan are published in India. So I'm not sure
yeah.
what books you're ordering from Karachi.
Yeah. I haven't. I mean, it's like a hypothetical. But anyway, so there is a sense of like, for us, like creating these systems. Now, like you're saying, like I have a cousin in the UK who's like has to bring back hordes of pata nahi kya kya for like people sometimes. And then there's like my friend was getting married right now, and she ordered so much stuff like Zara Shahjahan mangadi wahan pe, like so much stuff that poor boy he had to like bring everything back. So there's definitely like that's happening. Yeah, sorry, we can move on. Otherwise, I'll keep on talking about
No, no,
the
I think this is
textile.
great. This
Yeah, because we really miss
so
Pakistani salwars. I want them, so I could go on and
हाँ,
on
नहीं
about
हमें
this.
साड़ियाँ चाहिए और वो और आई मीन आई एम अबाउट टू रेफर मैं बोलने लगा था टेक्निकल फैब्रिक टर्मिनोलॉजी फिर मुझे ख्याल है कि मुझे कुछ नहीं पता कि मैं क्या बात कर रहा हूँ सो आई नीड टू गेट अदर फैमिली मेंबर्स आइदर माय वाइफ और माय मदर ऑन दिस कॉल to reference exactly what we're trying to get from India and build a supply line.
Yeah,
No, it's funny to me like अब लाहौर में um, the big stores and for me like as sort of creative output the way that the big fabric and textile companies have built their brands and build their
mm,
marketing and run their stores like it's really interesting to see how they're like really great creative outlets in Pakistan whose biggest markets would be in India otherwise लेकिन वो नहीं जा सकते तो वो फंसे हुए हैं उस तरह
mm,
and we're I think we've trapped ourselves in the same uh, situation, which is really kind of for any kind of creative industry, I think is deeply unsettling.
yeah. Yeah, I think the main thing to learn from this is that, I mean, like what I learned is that there's been a fiscal problem. Matlab, like economically, artists have been just cut off entirely. And like Sameer did say, ki just like Fawad Khan, which is starting off. I mean, he wasn't just starting off in Bollywood, but he was really like making inroads, and he's really good. And so it's just kind of like he was cut off, and Myra Khan wasn't allowed to come for promotions, and I guess like so many musical collaborations. Like right now, Misha Shafi sang a song for an OTT thing for an OTT show. I don't remember what it was, but someone mentioned it to me, but it has to be produced in Canada or something, like because there was like I mean, Bollywood is an industry that is a South Asian industry, and it has the stories have been such, and now it's kind of like exclusivized to just being Indian agenda or Indian like yahan pe bas. And but the thing is that there's one, I don't know, this is in the piece, but kya hai yaar? Why am I forgetting? Not Z5. This is going to be bad.
Zindagi.
Um, yeah, like no Zindagi, and then the new Z, like the people that produce
Just picture else
Churels
tha.
and
Mhm.
Qatil Hasina Ghulam and stuff like Shelja Kejriwal. I spoke to her and she was kind of like she was like I miss Pakistani TV too much to like let it go. And so what they're doing is they're kind of like it's all. I mean, you know, anyone who's North Indian and Pakistani knows it's Pakistan. You know, like I think my South Indian friend couldn't tell. He was like, "मुझे वैसे भी हिंदी उर्दू तो समझ नहीं आती है," so I can't tell. But like obviously, you know, like the style and the way of talking and everything. And but they're not saying Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad. They're just making it like kuch, you know, like a make believe South Asian city. So I think that's how they're able to air this stuff, and it's doing really well. Everyone's watching it. So, like there's ways, but it's not enough. I don't think it's enough.
Did you get into this rap scene at all?
Yeah, very much. I don't know. I wasn't like very much. अब मुझे भी समझ पता नहीं होगा. No, but no, not on the Pakistani side. I think except Faris Shafi, which is the most. He's like the most listened to at the moment. हमारे यहाँ. I don't know. At least with like
Ah,
my
Faris
friends.
is big in India.
Yeah, Faris is really big. Faris is really big because Faris is big in Delhi also because he does this like kind of like it's just like the angst and the kind of like this like just the kind of anger in his music is really like relatable to so many people. So Faris is quite big. I've been and then no, I don't think I've listened to anybody else. We have Prabdeep here. Like I've listened to people here. We have our Bombay rappers, जो
Deep is
ज़्यादा भी कर
great.
रहे हैं. Yeah, and we have Prab, who's like great. But then again, it would have been good for him to like collab with people and stuff. Which
So
he's
for me,
said.
the reason I mentioned this hip hop scene is because the Karachi hip hop, there's a sort of Lahore hip hop scene, right? Which is kind of often people of means usually singing this kind of like pop rap sound. But then there's this Karachi hip hop scene, a lot of which is, if you're familiar with the Young Stunners at all,
Yeah, yeah, I am.
so
Hmm.
I refer to it as the Stunners universe. तो उनके नीचे ना एक पूरा infrastructure है.
Huh.
And all of these guys are usually, often if you're listening to their songs, it's about like how they're using the music to pay for their education or उससे वो घर चला
Hmm.
रहे हैं, and that they like have to fight for their, how to make a studio. And a lot of it is about coming from a place of not means to being able to support themselves. So, very similar to kind of original hip hop. And US, like when, the rap scene sort of first started. Um, and it has these sort of spiritual ties to the Bombay rap scene, very much like Gully Boy inspired. And I think like Gully
Yeah.
Boy tells this story that is also kind of like a Pakistani story now, or at least like a Karachi story. Um,
Hmm.
and that's where I see a lot of these collabs happening as well. कि वो
Yeah.
एक half Indian, one Indian artist, one Pakistani artist, or because they're such like independent YouTube singles, they
Yeah.
don't have to go through Canada or anything because you can't really stop that level of
Yeah.
um, uh, collaboration. And so that's the one place where it feels to be thriving.
That's really
Um,
cool. I didn't know about that. That's amazing. मैंने देखा नहीं है. I'll look it up if you could like send it to me also. That sounds great. Because I
sure.
do
No,
think
I'll send you some few things.
Yeah, because I do think like city themed wise also, right? Like yours, like Delhi, Lahore, Karachi, Bombay, like there's just so much stuff in common. I mean, literally in common, like same houses and everything. And that's the thing I remember most about people coming in that school program. Like for me, my family's from the south, so I didn't. But like I'm sure that someone I went to school with found out कि उसकी family के घर में this person that he was hosting, like their cousin stayed in his family's house in Lahore and stuff like that. So it was like really sweet. And but this kind of stuff, I just mean that there's like so much stuff in common that I guess like music just becomes a place to discuss for fans and for musicians. So that sounds great. That sounds really good. And there's also
Do
like
you
with
remember this Salman Ahmed Ghumtana video where he goes to Patiala to like I think visit his family's old like ancestral home.
with Shubha
And so there's
Mudgal.
the
That's the one. Nice.
same. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's really sweet. And there was like I remember like there's also like a story that my ex boss Aisha uski she has this friend Rafe in Lahore and one friend Matan yahan pe, and then they got became friends, and they realized that they both grew up in like each other's houses. Um, like yeah, it's like super cool. I wanted to pester her to tell me the story, and she was like, "Nahi, ye meri kahani hai, you can't take it. Like leave it alone." But yeah, just like stuff like this is just really cool. And I was thinking when I was writing it, I was like, "Kya bahut cheesy hai?" Like, am I just becoming really, because it is like we are a bit like, but like dil bhar jata hai when you're like, if you're a certain kind of person, unlike a lot of people, like you just become really moved by anything related to Pakistan. And I was like, what does this mean? Is this too much? And then I realized it's not, because it is still like a really fresh history, and it is still like forbidden. It's not like आसान नहीं है ये सब करना. Like हम कर लेते हैं, बात कर लेते हैं, we do this stuff, but it's not like super easy, like super chill. So it's still like the romance state is not lost, but I think that makes sense. Um,
And it's in a way like I think us being third, fourth generation from partition has its sort
mm,
of own way of operating, right? Like I think our grandparents were the ones that at least my grandparents were the ones that actually traveled over. So उनके ज़हन में एक बहुत खास वो है. And so we're at the point now where we're actually trying to capture those stories
sure.
before they completely go away. Our
Yeah.
parents grew up in, kind of right after that. And so they have, depending on which sector of society you talk to, it's either like khatam karo aage chalo, or like,
Exactly.
kabhi khatam nahi
Huh.
hoga. And then I think
Yeah.
our generation, which is in a way like far enough removed from that time to uh, not carry those wounds directly, but then we are kind of political and cultural enterprises manufacture this new kind of wound that you can
Yeah.
attach yourselves to, which we are. And I think we have this choice of either attaching to that or attaching to Coke Studio YouTube comment section.
Yeah.
And it uh, so it's nice to be able to, I think, think about it in terms of, okay, like there is some hope to build something new, or some hope to imagine ways of working together, or building some like easy bridges
Totally.
that will allow for you know even little bits of creative output to find willing audiences on
Yeah.
either side of the border.
Yeah. I mean, it's like for me, and like you're saying, it's really important. It does, like it did help these kinds of like you, when things were feeling really closed down for some reason, like interacting with something in Pakistan made me feel better. Like it was not for some reason, like I knew it would, but also like it just made me feel really like, okay, there is this world that's bigger than they're saying, and that I've always known. And maybe like one day you can access it freely, like it can happen. So I do and I remember after this piece, like a person who's, I think he's 70, and he sent me a message like on email, and he was like, thank you for keeping our dream alive and things. And I was like, really sweet, where it was like, okay. And like like you're saying with my parents generation, they were very, it was very like पैसे कमाओ, घर बनाओ, like stability. And I think it was like they couldn't really, because it was their parents that told them whatever they told them. My dad was like, he's not at all like, I mean, he's very as what I'm trying to say is that he's not like majoritarian. He's Hindu, but he's not like, we have like mixed family here, but he's still like not big on the sentiment, because he's just like, nah, ऐसे ही है, like ऐसे ही होगा, like he's very straight minded. But with, I think the stories, like you're saying, like to me they're different, because I want to know more. And I remember like 10 years ago, me and my sister also did this thing where we were, I think, there was this like woman my grandfather was in love with before he moved. And they never met. And, matlab, we know her name because he's told us so much. We like trying to find her in Karachi. We were like, we're going to find this family. It's not a Google ad. तो नहीं हुआ. नहीं हो सकता है. Like, India, Pakistan को लाके बहुत सारे लोग हैं. It's not a possibility. But it's still like, it was sweet. Like, it's just like that kind of stuff is just fun. But yeah.
No, what a lovely story. I think that's your next piece, is
Yeah. I
your
was saying a bit more.
grandfather's long lost lover.
Yeah. Imagine I just like turn off to some family in Karachi and be like, "Hi, मैं इंडिया से आई हूँ." They're just like, "दफा हो जाओ, we don't care." बहुत
My
time हो गया.
memories of being my I have some really distinct memories of being in Delhi and being in India. One was like market में किसी को अगर फौरन पता चल जाए कि आप हैं वो पाकिस्तानी है, तो they would be
Yeah.
super nice to you.
Oh,
Um,
that's good.
तो अच्छा आप पाकिस्तान से आए हैं, फिर मतलब they'd also be curious, but they'd also want to be good hosts. Um,
Yeah.
और वन रियली फन थिंग वाज हम जब आगरा गए ताजमहल देखने, तो उधर वो फॉरेनर रेट ज़्यादा होता है, तो हम सब लोकल बन के
हाँ,
जा रहे थे। अच्छा, कभी कभार
हाँ।
पहचाने जाते थे कि ये लोकल नहीं है, तो वो पूछते थे आपसे कि चीफ मिनिस्टर कौन है और प्राइम मिनिस्टर कौन है, दे वुड आस्क यू लाइक स्टफ अबाउट। अच्छा, तो हम सब याद करके गए हुए थे, तो वी हैड दिस पर्सन
हाँ,
ट्रैवलिंग विद अस। उससे जब पूछा तो वो, उससे पूछा भी नहीं, वो सिर्फ उन्होंने कहा तुम इंडियन हो, इस तरह की बात की, दे आस्क्ड हिम सम सॉर्ट ऑफ इनोक्यूअस क्वेश्चन एंड ही जस्ट नरेटेड
हाँ।
ऑल द फैक्ट्स without prompting because he was so nervous. Um,
That's really funny.
and we were on the train from Delhi to Mumbai. अब वो ओवरनाइट
Hmm.
ट्रेन जो होती है ना, उस पे थे सब। तो हम ताश खेल रहे थे, कुछ और था, एंड सो देयर वाज वो दिस काइंड ऑफ ओपन कैबिन जिसमें चार पांच छह बेड्स थे, तो चार पांच हमारे थे, दो सम अदर पीपल वर ट्रैवलिंग और लोकल्स।
हाँ,
तो थोड़ी देर बाद लाइक दे केप्ट, देयर वाज अ कपल पीपल देयर वर सॉर्ट ऑफ ऑन द टॉप बंक, और वो देख रहे थे हमें बड़ी देर से ना, बट नॉट इन अ मीन वे, व्हिच इज इन अ काइंड ऑफ दे वर वाचिंग अस प्ले कार्ड्स।
yeah.
um तो एट सम पॉइंट दे वर लाइक, अच्छा आप लोग पाकिस्तान से हो? तो हमने कहा हाँ। देन यू लाइक, हमारे जैसे ही हो आप तो, with
Yeah,
a level of kind of surprise but also endearment. And there
yeah,
was a lot of that. There was a lot of that type of um uh,
yeah.
warmth that it still shows up, I think, when the opportunity arises. Like Hamid, like I work with a lot of people from India and people based in
Mm.
India, and so we have the opportunity to kind of open that door. And it's so common that I feel like that uh, same love of culture from across both ends is not that far to reach on a person to person level.
No, it's yeah, it's I mean, it's like really easy, and it's I do feel like even that is suffering a bit, because of what's happening here. I think people are a bit like wary now. Pakistanis I meet abroad and stuff, they're just like, like I had really close friends when I lived in Brussels, और वहाँ पे there were these two brothers, Shehzad and Ijaz, who ran like उनकी restaurant थी वहाँ पे, वो मुझे बहुत खाना खिलाते थे, like मुफ्त में, like just like I would like always be there because I was really lonely and I was like a student, I was really young. But I went back to visit Abhi this year and I met them and they were just kind of like, they were a bit like थोड़े खफा थे, and I was a little, I was like, yeah, मेरी गलती नहीं है. I just let's like we have to move on this, but I did understand, like I entirely understood, and I was like, it must suck, like just like old friends that you have, and these are like, I guess, like people who have like, like run restaurants and everything in Europe, like it does. And so I was like, I understand. It must really suck. कि, like pehle your friends, like your Indian friends who like are in the same demographic in the same country, they suddenly become a bit like, no, kya ho raha hai? Like we're not going to eat here and stuff. Like it's awful. It's really bad. So yeah. Anyway, I was thinking about that. I was like, it also. I hope it doesn't affect that stuff, but it also doesn't. Like you're saying, like we're here, everybody's talking, so that's good.
चलो फिर हमारी अपनी डेढ़ की मस्जिद ये कि आप इस पे आते रहना, हम और आप बात करते रहेंगे, and then we'll you know
Oh
we'll do some small things.
yeah. I I remember you want to talk about like the new artists. Like, do you still मैंने ज़्यादा ही
Yeah, let's
tangents पे
do it.
बात.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to end. But yeah, like what new artists are you listening to? What's big? What are people around you listening to? Hassan Raim you mentioned already.
Yeah.
But who else?
Well, I'm listening to. I think like I'm listening to Manu quite a lot. I'm listening. Who I think is so good. Recently I listened to Abdul Hanan. Abdul Hanan. नहीं, हाँ,
Great. I
so
I got
good,
a chance to
right?
see him live a few weeks ago.
Oh man, that's
Um,
really.
it's really great. He does a live version of "As It Was," Harry Styles
हाँ.
song, which like I
Oh wow.
wouldn't have guessed before seeing it, but it like really works.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, I mean, he's so good, and also like again, wasn't able to put it in the piece, but I was like, yeah, these guys are so much better than who we have. And my editors was like, ये ना ये teenage sentiment नहीं कर सकते हो. You can't put this in because like that was my. I remember my best friend was like, तुझे तुझे यही करना है ना, तुझे basically बुराइयां करनी है लोगों की like, in the piece. And I was like, fine, okay, I'm not going to do that, but I do think that they like everyone is so good, and I feel if I could do this like pit people against each other, if I and irresponsibly I may have. So I'm glad I was. That was cut off. And it's Natasha Nurani, who's like amazing. And
Also, my wife,
yeah, I know.
which
I was
it
kind of like,
feels like it would be a lie by omission at this point.
yeah. No, actually, my friend Tuba did tell me when I told her I was talking to you. So I was like, how do I get like, is it awkward? Should I just, I don't know, like, should I just say it? But yeah, she's so good. Please pass on my admiration. She's like amazing. My sister's obsessed with her. It's like so good. And फिर who else are we listening to? I mean, listen to Faris a lot. Like he's like a big like for the vibe. He's like a big inspiration to many. Like a lot of my friends are just really big on him. फिर like I follow your playlist and only like yesterday I was like there's so many people I just haven't listened to at all. So I'm gonna go back and do that.
I'm reaching a point with this playlist where I'm honestly having trouble keeping up. It's there's so much new stuff coming out, and I've
Yeah,
like over time I'm also amassing like a list of more artists. So like I'm my net is growing, but also the actual supply of music is increasing also.
yeah,
But my ability to sort through it and listen to it in a timely fashion is slowly, I'm reaching my limits.
yeah.
And I wonder whether this is sustainable or can continue, which is a great sign for the industry, bad sign for me.
So,
um, but no,
yeah.
lots of people that are sub 1,000 monthly listeners,
Hmm.
and still I'm just like, oh, these guys are really good. Like they deserve to be heard more. And I think there's a lot of people that are really outperforming the size of their audience right now.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
and so it's a really exciting time to have so many people that are so good,
that's
but
really
still
cool.
small enough that you can like really get access to them and feel like you have some sort of a direct connection.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a question for you actually. Like, how is it like there's just so much good stuff? How are these guys all making it happen? I'm saying, like, this is amazing. Like, Rosanna, kuch naya naya, like, there's just so many people. Like you're saying, it's hard to keep up. But, like, what's happening in Pakistan? Like, are
I
people.
don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure how to explain it. I think, I mean, Natasha has a theory, which is that the COVID lockdowns sort of basically broke the shackles of, or the
Hmm.
control of the existing kind of incumbents in the music industry who would get all of the audiences and all the big concerts, and sort of
Hmm.
equalize the playing field on the internet. What it also did, I think, was create a perfect time for all of these sort of electronic musicians to gain a foothold. And I think it kind of combined with the rise of a few artists at like the
Yeah.
same time. So Hassan in like 2020 was really kind of picking up. He had a few songs, and
Yeah.
then like he really picked up at that time. Talal, who's been around the industry for a long time, in
Great.
2020 2021 started finally hitting this sort of really pop sound that was much more accessible to a larger group of people. And I think he was kind of ahead of the audience for many years, and the audience finally like caught up with him. um,
Hmm. Yeah.
and this like rap scene, like the youngsters, like 2020 2019, they started coming back up also. And so this sort of big indie scene that I think in like 2015 was kind of rock based. 2015 was the sort of like weird darkish time in Pakistani music where YouTube was banned, concerts
Yeah.
weren't happening, like so the security situation, there was still sort of lingering senses of it.
Hmm.
And I think COVID kind of wiped the slate clean
Yeah.
and coincided with some artists rising. And so you can actually sense that there's like a few pockets of development, and they are kind of reinforcing. So for example, like Manu, Talal, Salor, Rosio, like all of these guys kind of work with each
Hmm.
other. um, uh, in Like Hassan works with a number of them. Hassan crosses this barrier, but also like the kind of hip hop folks, and he works with a number of different producers. um, so the number of kind of connections that are happening in the industry seem to be quite large. And I think that creates a sort of reinforcing mechanism, because it means like you're more likely to know someone that has a studio, you're more likely to know a producer, you're more likely to learn methods of how to do
That's
it. There's a distribution channel. And I think with this sort of collaboration style thing happening, which I think in kind of Pakistani music, uh, these collaborations were an innovation in the Coke Studio era, which was
Hmm.
like, let's take two artists and put them together and have them do a song, which is so kind of normal now, and also kind of in the kind of global hip hop scene, but normal in the Pakistani scene now, where you'll see two or three artists um, on the same track, which I think has the effect of growing the cumulative audience of both artists.
Yeah.
And I think these young guys have really used that really well. And because they're so young, and because they're so unfazed by the weight of the previous sense of the
True.
music industry, like just kind of all the failures of it, all the difficulties of it, because they don't have that same level of baggage, they can operate in a kind of new free way that is Instagram first, online
Yeah.
platform first, and everything else second. That I think
Hmm.
gives them a level of flexibility that they never had before. That's my sort of short estimate of what's happening, but I'm sure there's sort of more things in there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for that. But like it really is something. Like I was just thinking, and also I think that like in India there's this huge weight, like I was saying also on like training, it's like ठीक से train करके आओ ये but I just think that really stifles like like then you just like everything tends to sound a bit similar. फिर people start aspiring, they spend so much time like getting trained and they want to like get into Bollywood because इतने आप पैसे खर्च वर्च किए हैं तो फिर like बनाओ भी कहीं से. It's like that kind of direct line to commercialization kind of happens. But yeah, what you're telling me is like just this kind of like freshness I'm missing here. नहीं हो रहा है.
Pakistan में थोड़ा सा कम है training पे जोर, but in a way like some things there should be more of. Like for example, these like neoclassical never really developed in Pakistan, where like young people took this sort of classical form and moved it forward. बहुत कम होता है, and I think part of that is this sort of aversion to training as well, and the sort of lack of systems of training. Like if you want to grow in that discipline, you have to you know hire an instructor outside of every other kind of domain. Like आपको Instagram पे नहीं मिलेगा वो वाला instructor, like but Ableton आप सीख जाएंगे Instagram पे.
हाँ.
So I feel like Pakistan mein wo divide jo hai of the sort of like traditional mechanisms and new ones is so divided that we have
Hmm.
a kind of inability. We are able to take on the sort of new Western forms
Yeah.
and present them, but we're not necessarily able to move forward our own kind of intrinsic traditional art forms, which I think like that is stronger in India. And I don't know if like the ability to train or that infrastructure is part of it. But that's one thing where I hope the sort of our industry kind of grows.
Yeah, and it would be cool if people would collaborate, so these things could also be exchanged, I guess. तो बोल ही देते हैं end में. I
हाँ
hope
बिल्कुल.
कभी हो जाए
चलो,
at least.
we
No. Yeah.
we've gone on for long enough. So what a thank you so much for joining. I hope everybody. I'll put a link to your article in the notes for this podcast. So I hope everybody gets a chance to go and read it. And I hope this is not the last time you talk to this audience.
Yeah, me too. I'd be very happy to be back. मतलब, I'm like not musically, I don't have much expertise, but I could come and do some non-expert rants on some stuff. So yeah.
Non-expert rant should be the subheading of
Yeah.
this entire program. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so
Thank
much. I really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.